There's a lot of talk right now about excess capacity. There was the idea that is there an oversupply of veterinarians? Is there an under demand by clients? And the AVMA comes out and says, you know what, there's about this 12% excess capacity of time that practices are not filling with exams. What's the problem? What do you think where's the appeal lacking at veterinary practices right now? Why aren't clients coming in?
Sure. Well, I think, with everything that we've gone through the economy since 2007, there's been a lot of changes. And I think it's not that we don't have consumers out there with money to spend. We certainly do. But I will tell you that the consumers are being much more pickier in where they spend that money, and they really want to make sure that they're getting the value. Now, that's nothing new, but I think in veterinary medicine, over the last 10 years or so, I think we've had it fairly easy. And I think it's time to pull up our big boy pants and start to really do some work to make sure that we actually to go after these clients and really educate them on what services they need. It no longer is it going to be that we can just sit in our office and expect them to come to us.
Where do you see the role of the practice manager at sort of the average veterinary practice in making that happen?
Sure. It's funny, the majority of practices now still are that 1 to 2 doctor practice, and you're starting to see the larger, 3 to 5 to 7 doctor practices, you're starting to see those grow, and you're seeing practice mergers, of course. But you're still seeing a lot of, smaller veterinary practices, and so some of those don't always support a full-time veterinary practice manager. As we continue to grow, though, that's going to change, and that's something that I know at Veterinary Hospital Managers Association at VHMA, we're continuing to really work with managers in raising that standard, raising that education, so that we will have those managers in our industry ready to go. We recently launched the veterinary competencies that kind of overviews everything that's needed to be a competent veterinary manager, and I think that's certainly a great starting point. And then, of course, we have the certification process for veterinary managers, and that's ultimately the gold standard, and that's what we want our managers out in this industry accomplishing. And that really says you know your stuff.
So those critical competencies, I think, are extremely helpful because they sort of set a baseline for saying these are the absolute skills and traits that you need as a practice manager at a veterinary practice. But I know there are a lot of veterinarians out there who've heard for years they need a practice manager to take on some of the parts of the business they're too busy to handle. But they hire perhaps someone they like, but doesn't have any management experience. So someone who fits in really well with the clients and knows the practice culture, but doesn't have any of the training. Where would you encourage that veterinarian to help that new practice manager? Where would you encourage them to set?
Sure. Well, I think I want to take actually a step back first,
Yeah.
in that before we actually hire the manager, I think it's important that the biggest question I get is, what does a manager do? And I don't think there's no recipe card I can give you to say this is what a manager does. And that's where I encourage the practice owner, the owners, to sit down and make a list of what is it they want their manager doing. And before we hire anybody within or we go outside looking to hire somebody, we need to really have a concrete plan of what it is we want them doing. And then we're going to go out and look for that person. If we can find somebody that's competent in those areas in-house, wonderful. Because that's how I started. I worked my way up at scrubbing syringes and picking up poop and worked myself within. But there's going to be times where we do have that favorite person and they get along so well with the clients and the staff, but they're not going to be the right person to lead, because it's much different. It's much different to be a colleague or to be a support staff member than it is to manage and have that ownership viewpoint.